Well, I love to quote the instruction manual that I received when I entered the AP Bureau in June 28, 1962. I arrived the same day as Horst Voss. I'd come in from Singapore, he'd come in from Laos, and Malcolm Brown was the bureau chief, and Malcolm was a tall, fair-haired, also an AP fair-haired guy, because Wes Gallagher, the president of the AP, really admired Mal. But Mal had several years' experience in the US military, so he gave us an instruction manual, and I want to quote from it quickly. He wrote, "The whole idea of covering a military action is to get the news and pictures back and not to play soldier yourself. You should know how to swim, canals and ditches are often above your head, lie prone under fire and move only on your belly, look for cover and move toward it. Other advice, when moving with troops, avoid staying close to the head of a column or the point man in a formation. Professional soldiers are paid to do this." And he says, "Do not stand or march close to a radio man or medic because they are prime targets of the enemy." And an additional point he made, he said, "Stick close to the commander who is generally in the safest position available." But he did add, "You'll learn more from him than most of the others anyway." So we had that advice. Now, we're all aware, I'm sure, that Vietnam was the most open war for journalists in modern history. In fact, you have to go back to, I guess, to the American Civil War, when you had the kind of pictures that you see in this great AP book, close-ups of the faces of dead young American soldiers. You have to go back to Matthew Brady in the Civil War, I think, to get similar images. But it was that tradition that guided all the photographers, that Larry Burroughs that Mike mentioned, and Horst Voss and the others that came to Vietnam. They were also really respectful of Robert Capa, who had been killed a decade earlier in Vietnam. And they often quoted Capa's advice, if the pictures aren't good enough, you aren't close enough. Does anyone on AP ever say that to you? If the pictures aren't good enough, you're not close enough. So there was a degree of bravery plus experience that led to the pictures that have emerged in the book. One other point, we were reliant constantly on our Vietnamese staff in Vietnam, Nick and Phan Dan Phuc, essential for us to get pictures that were not easy for us to get with Vietnamese troops. Their bravery, total commitment to work for the AP and bring pictures back was unbelievable. Both were wounded, and Phan Dan Phuc lost an eye, but they continued to cover. So there was a combination of these factors, our experience, the tradition of photography and coverage.
What are some of the factors that go into your choosing and getting somebody to go to war, and what did you learn about your own experience that informs sending other photographers now to cover conflicts around the world?
Well, the first thing that's very important to note is that we do this purely on a volunteer basis. So we ask around and we talk to people who we think have sufficient experience in covering conflict, or who have the right attitude or the right aptitude for these sorts of jobs, and we inquire with them whether or not they're interested in going to these assignments. And usually they want to, but not always. And when they don't want to, we don't pressure them. And if during an assignment they find that they are uncomfortable, or that the equation has somehow changed and they want to leave the assignment for their own reasons, we respect that and we pull people off of assignments. But generally we were looking for people who are psychologically prepared and physically prepared to take the sort of risks that covering combat or conflict entails. And so when we find those people and we put them into the theater of battle or conflict, whatever it might be, it's very important to have a dialogue with those people to understand what they're seeing, what they want to do, what aspects of the story we think are important. And so we try and guide the coverage from afar, also understanding that we can't micromanage the coverage from afar. So there's a dialogue of trust that builds up with the photographers on assignment or with the journalists on assignment, where we're giving them the perspective from afar, but also respecting their perspective on the ground.
I mean, you famously took the picture of a Marine who was, at the instant he was hit by a sniper right there. Had you interacted with him before that? Did you know his name when he got shot? You had that picture. What were you thinking when you sent it back to New York?
No, I did not. I had never met Joshua Bernard formally. I'd seen him around the fire base. There were probably 400 other Marines in that little outpost for the first couple of days because they had just assaulted the town. I'd seen him, never met him, didn't really know his name, and he was actually on point, and I saw him on point while we were on that patrol, and I was about maybe the third person back. There were a couple of guys who were even with each other just behind him, and I thought about going up closer to Bernard, but I thought, no, I don't want to interfere with what he's doing, and I don't want to be a distraction. I'm just going to stay back where I am. After that happened, after I photographed, that moment, as far as what I was thinking when I sent it back to New York, I waited until after the embargo was over. The embargo is you cannot release any names of casualties or send out any pictures until after next of kin has been notified. So I waited about 2 or 3 days until after the company commander actually came up to us and said, okay, embargo's lifted, you guys can publish names now. And that actually happened on a Friday. So I waited until Monday when the full crew on the desk was back and the desk manager was going to be there, because I wanted to make sure that someone in charge, someone with a lot of responsibility would be there to field that picture. I didn't want it just going out. I didn't want it to just accidentally, we get 1,000 pictures a day going out of on the wire just domestically alone. And I didn't want somebody who had been looking through too many pictures that day just to not think about what was happening. My thought was when I photographed it was, I have to do this. This is important. This is necessary. I don't know if we can even release it now. I don't know how this relates to the rules that we signed, but what's important is documenting this. This is history. This is part of history. This is the cost of war. And so when I sent that picture in, all of that was weighing on me. I have to discuss this with my managers back at the office. There needs to be, a debate about it. I didn't want this, to come quickly. There were a lot of factors involved.
The unit I was with, the first sergeant, who was really in a Marine unit, is the straw that really stirs the drink, was the first man in our unit to be killed during the invasion. And it was a very difficult time for the troops because they idolized this man, and they all had previously thought they were invincible, and they saw the most invincible man in the unit get cut down. We had a very difficult decision to make because we had been embedded with this one unit for 3 months, and so when I would come on the air, people knew which unit I was with. And when we had to mention that we had taken some very serious casualties, it automatically struck me that the people at home were going to narrow it down to within 100 people, someone they might know. And this was before the notification process or whatever, so we had to be very, very careful. And we actually went to some pains to not report where we were. We expanded the unit to be a regiment, not a company. So we were actually putting out information to kind of disguise who might have been killed in that unit. And I think that's something we didn't understand, the military didn't understand with the MVET process, that we were going to be so instantaneous with the reporting that we were going to be days ahead of any official notification. And that loomed very large on all of us. We all took the responsibility much more seriously at that point. And I think Julie made a point. You have a tendency to gauge the sentiments of the unit you're with in the situation. And even though we signed these contracts on the embed process of what was going to be allowed and not allowed, there was a lot of give and take between the officers we were assigned and the units we were assigned with in the situation. And something interesting happened after I came back from Iraq. The Pentagon gathered a bunch of embed reporters, and they brought back the officers from the field to do kind of a post-mortem of how it all worked. And to the absolute horror of the Department of Defense people who put together the embed process, they realized that none of the field officers had ever seen the contract that we had signed, what was allowed and was not allowed. And then they asked the reporters about the contract that we had signed, and we all said we didn't even read it. We knew it was non-negotiable. We knew we weren't going in unless we signed it. We just signed it. But we knew the broad strokes of it, about not giving away positions, not saying where we were going, troop strengths, not identifying a wounded soldier or a dying soldier. But an interesting thing happened out of that whole process. As they dug a little bit deeper, they discovered that the officer of the unit and the reporter generally worked together and came up with solutions to situations that seemed to be the right thing to do. And I think they were very amazed that, given the love-hate relationship between the media and the military, that we would be able to figure this thing out. And I think it became because we were so much apart, being with the units, understanding their situation, and they were understanding our situation, that we were able, the embed process, we were able to do this kind of give and take and hopefully do the right thing based on the situation.